Felicity, thank you so much for joining me today on the What is a Good Life podcast. From having enjoyed many conversations with you at this point, I'm really looking forward to seeing where this goes today.
Well, do you know what? Thank you so much for having me. And, I was just saying to you, and I really want to make sure I hold myself to going, this is an opportunity for me to be very open and vulnerable about where I'm at and where I'm at in my journey of working for myself. And yeah, so thank you for opening up this space for me.
No worries at all, Felicity. So, as you're aware, the question that I kick this off with is the question of, is there a question you're exploring as you move through life?
Wow. Um, that's such a okay. So that question right now, I mean, okay. So maybe there's something for me of like, let me not pin myself down too much. But right now, that question for me is, how do I stand openly and rootedly with all my mess and vulnerability and be true to that? I think maybe there's something of that. How do I not front up to pretend to be something I'm not? How do I come back to all my mess, all my vulnerability, and not find myself pretending to be someone I'm not?
And for you, how has that question come alive for you as such?
I love that question actually. But so I guess like when I went into therapy in my 20s, I was, and I say this with love to my 20-year-old self, I was a right old hot mess. As we can be in this world. And I think part of that messiness came about from me feeling like I had too much mess and trying to pretend to be um, cooler, more confident, less messy, less confused. Yeah. So I think for me, when I went into therapy, I remember saying to my therapist, by the time I got into therapy, and I only went because I was out of better ideas, I was out of cleverer ideas, and it was so hard to get through the day. And so I went into therapy, and I remember saying to my therapist, I don't know who I am. Like, I don't know who I am. And gradually through life I've come to find my ground, and I guess that ground is unfailingly when I can be open to the wisdom of other people like a sponge, and also when I resolutely don't pretend to have less mess than I have. There's something really important about like a grounding place for me. Yeah.
How, just out of interest, even that acknowledgement of I don't know who I am.
Mm.
Um, I'm always so curious with that notion or that idea of knowing who we are. How have you kind of gone about getting or be, like kind of standing on some ground around that, or getting a sense of that from that position?
Maybe if I start by saying how I lost it.
Sure.
Um, so I think I have ADHD, and I've often had the sense of being too much, like too sad or too angry or too loud. I'm definitely too loud. um, um, too impulsive, too, yeah. So I think I'd always have that feeling. And then also too anxious. Like when I was younger, I didn't know how to make friends. I didn't like myself. And then I felt like I had to pretend that I did and that I knew how to make friends or I knew how to get by in the world. But with this really powerful aching sense, I had no clue. And so I would often chase things like being liked or being seen to be something, I would chase that and make that my master. And of course, I remember when I was like 18 or 19, it would be that I really like, I would find my ground in like maybe if boys like me, then I would have this brief moment of like, I like myself because this person's liking me. But of course, if you chase that, then the minute that they don't like you, or the minute that something goes wrong or warps that in some way, my sense of self would just crash even harder than it ever had, which would make me more anxious and chase that harder. And then it would go wrong because I'd be so vulnerable, so I wouldn't be able to protect myself properly. So, and then it would become a bit of a spiral. And I think that's why I've always loved working with people who experience similar difficulties with their sense of self, because I know in my bones that sense of shame and panic, and how hard I have fought sometimes in my life to just find a brief glimpse of like, how do I like myself? How do I accept myself? But of course, what that also meant was the more I was chasing my sense of self by looking at the way that other people saw me, the further away I was from knowing what I was, because my responses, I was trying to pattern my responses um, for another, or what I imagined other people wanted to see. So then that's how I lost touch with myself. So I guess like when I asked that question of like, so what therapy allowed me to do, and then training in therapy, and then working with people, and supporting people, and the kindness of friends, allowed me to go, what if, and actually sometimes the more vulnerable I've been, more honest I've been, the calmer I felt, because I'm like, okay, well, you can't. I don't mind if you hit me from this place, because I'm like, I know, I'm here,
Yeah.
that's me. But also, people in general often haven't done that, and it gives people the opportunity to be truly gracious, and to show you their wisdom or their compassion, or um, and to have a much deeper connection. And in that deep connection, and in that deep connection with myself, um yeah, I guess like that's how I find my authentic stand on the world. Does that make sense?
Oh, this makes absolute sense, and I think you've also touched on a couple of really kind of I think poignant things that a lot of us could relate to. Like, the idea of trying to see ourselves, like just when you said it there, I was like, oh my God, that's like, how could we ever expect to find peace with the way that so many people, I think that generally we've kind of been conditioned to perceive this life, which is trying to see what other people may like and assuming that we can see ourselves through their eyes and kind of guessing as to what they want from us, with maybe not even it being explicitly told to us. Like
Mm,
I don't know, like I can absolutely relate to that, and also the sense then of if we do put our value in something, i.e., how other people are perceiving us, or when you're saying if it was for boys to like you at that age,
mm,
like how painful that can be to not get the either the validation or the acceptance that we're looking for when we haven't been ourselves in get like there's almost like a double hit or something with that, like do you know what I
and
mean, like, and I
especially being,
the moment you said that it touched
yeah,
something in my body when I think I've had various moments or experiences of that through my life where I was like, oh yeah, I did that.
that's so right, because there's the shame that happens when you're trying, and also, of course, for a girl, when you do that, and possibly for men as well, but you can end up in like, sexually very difficult situations because you're not protecting yourself as you need to,
Mm.
so, but, um, not that it should be down to women to protect themselves, but you're more likely to find yourselves in risky situations, and that you're then not, which prompts a further shame. And certainly that was true for me. um yeah, exactly, Mark. The shame that comes of being like found out is like the shame that comes, like, it's like when you've accidentally tucked your skirt in your pants or forgotten to pull up your fly or something like that. It's that shame. It's that shame. Like, you just saw me. Yeah, it's that shame. Oh,
Yeah.
it stings. Yeah. And funny enough, I remember someone saying around that time, and it was so funny, that for me as well, the more anxious I get, the more chaotic I get. I'm always a bit chaotic. But and I remember someone saying at that time, one of my managers said, "We like you, Felicity, but you're quite chaotic." And I had that feeling of being shamed then. Like there was something about someone seeing how messy you are. Does that make
Right.
sense?
Yeah. This makes complete sense. What is it about that, just from your perspective? Like, because, or even the feeling of shame in that moment, because I think that there's something to this that strikes me that, and you've touched on it even just with kind of acknowledging whatever mess is presently here, but just the sense of, we're trying to project that this isn't part of our inner experience. And then, even if it's seen, or even if it were felt by you as chaotic at the time, or in any
Mm.
moment chaotic, that there's still, I don't know, some, if I think about moments in my life, there's some idea that, crap, they've seen me, but what the part of me they've seen of me isn't the part that matches up with expectations, or maybe
Yeah.
ideas of should. And yet, so many of those projections, or even I think what we're collectively projecting, just don't match up with human experience for me. Do you know?
Oh,
Like,
yeah. I mean, one of the really big, what was coming up for me when you said that, Mark, was like, there's a big sort of, I don't know if it's a Western myth. I'd be really interested to be educated by others, but there's a myth about not trying too hard. Like,
hmm,
there's a myth about not finding things too difficult, that there's a kind of cultural value around not trying too hard and not finding things difficult. And like when I became a parent, like I really noticed it. Like there was a lot of sort of parent language of like, oh, I just leave my kids get on with it, oh, just, and there was a kind of machismo to it. Do you know what I mean? Like, oh, I just let my kid. And I think to myself, what's wrong with parenting being hard work? What's wrong? I don't get that. I mean, I'm not saying that, okay, we don't want a helicopter parent, but I think there's something about going, it's okay for things that matter, like your relation. Because actually, I think you're right, Mark. I think it leads us to a lot of problems in relationships. When I see couples in couples therapy or whatever, or in psychotherapy, when people come to me, people say it shouldn't be this hard. I'm
hmm.
like, okay, well, let my first therapeutic intervention to you be my friend. It jolly well, it is that hard. It's even harder than that. And in fact, if you're not willing to do that hard work, it's going to be even harder. It is hard work. That's okay. It's really great that you're trying. There's no greater courage than the courage to try when it's really fucking hard. That's beautiful.
Yeah, there's, I don't know, there's something to that I think there's such a, when I do get that sense, because I get the sense that a lot of people find this life quite hard, and I definitely get the sense that people find relationships, or intimate relationships, quite hard. And I guess in the context of a culture that's pretended that feelings don't exist, it's no wonder why we might struggle. We might struggle in some of these scenarios. But that idea that we're almost trying to look effortless in doing something,
Mm,
like, I think we can feel it too, though, from people. Like, and look, some people, there's a vast array of human experiences, right? So some people could say the same thing, and I might believe it from one person, and I may not feel it or believe it from another. But
yeah.
there is something about that, even just when you're talking about the kind of the growing up adolescence experience of trying to look or be perceived a certain way. And I think in some ways we don't kind of let go of that, like, of trying to project or
Mm,
show that we somehow much have a much greater understanding, or feel for this life than, and maybe a sense of certainty than we actually have.
yeah. And that we find life much easier than we really do. Yeah.
Mm,
Um, and with there's this, so I think this, and for me there's always been like a touch point when I can come back to the truth of, I guess there's always something, and in therapy you see this a lot, but people tend to come in therapy when the story about themselves has ceased to serve the inner lived reality, and it becomes like a prison. And I definitely think that was true of me coming into therapy. And it sort of prevents you from really gaining access to yourself and the infinite possibilities of self. So I think for me, there's something of like, I found my ground in coming back to noticing the ways that I might just try and like puff myself out a little bit And if I can notice those and all the things that I don't want to tell people, what are the parts of my story that I don't want to tell people? Those are probably the bits that I need to tell, you know. Um, and yeah.
For you, what kind of comes to mind in that experience? Like, what is that sense? You've already kind of described the calming effect of kind of speaking your own
Mm,
truth or whatever the authentic experience may be in the moment. But for you, just that's such a I think that's such a powerful sentence. You know, the story ceases to serve,
mm,
or stops relating to kind of my inner experience,
mm,
and there's a prison for then a prison almost around what's possible.
yeah.
Like for you, what kind of comes to mind? Like how do you send like even on a kind of somatic level, how do you notice something in your experience that
Yeah.
makes that quite clear to you, or how is that?
Yeah. So, okay, one of the first things is that I will often go into rescuing everybody, is one of the things. I will start becoming very busy around everybody else's business. The second thing is that I'll find it very hard to focus. Like suddenly I have loads of different thoughts in my mind. And the third thing is that I will have something that's feeling shameful that I don't want to tell people about, and that I will try and distract from it. Maybe I'll, scroll on the internet, or maybe I'll immerse myself in a thousand different things, when there's actually something and actually that's why I'm often like a little bit wary. Like nowadays there's an awful lot of stuff around, like, oh, if your kid's feeling anxious and agitated, give it something to play with, give it this like special toy, and I'm sure that's really helpful sometimes. I don't want to denigrate that, but what I definitely notice with my daughter, and what I definitely notice myself is, and what I suppose the question that I'd like to ask is that also because sometimes we don't want to hear the messy story that's leading to the anxiety. Like I remember one day coming, I remember one day seeing my beautiful daughter like blowing bubbles outside in the yard, and I was like, oh, she's a bit old for bubbles. And actually, what it then transpired was going on was that she was feeling anxious, and that someone had said, if you blow these bubbles, you're like blowing your thoughts away. Well, fuck blowing your thoughts away. There was something that had happened that was in her head that she needed to like fresh out, just like the stuff for me. So I think, yeah, there's something of like, before we go shh, 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 and we tidy it away, let's just give it that day in court. Like whatever it is that you don't want, and I do as a supervisor and as a therapist, I'm like, whatever it is that you don't want to say, I'm afraid that's exactly what we need to talk about. You know?
Yeah.
Mm. I don't know if that resonates for you, or if you have a different. Yeah, how would you notice it in yourself?
I notice it as a kind of a deep discomfort.
Mm,
So I've unfortunately, like I must say, I enjoy the fact that my life feels like it's slowed down, like that I give plenty of time and space for really just noticing, not even within like a deliberate um, practice of now I'm doing this reflection thing, but just throughout the course of my day, my movements are quite local as well, if you know what I mean. So
mm,
there's always a lot of time and space to notice, I guess. And what I definitely notice is it really isn't about being even caught. It's not even about what the other person may or may not think about me now. If I have said something, or if I've presented myself in a way that I don't feel to be true,
mm.
or that maybe I think is trying to allude to me being more proficient or better, or in whatever
Yeah.
way it will be, um, I feel a dis-ease in my body, like, and
Mm.
it becomes really clear to me. And even I'll give you an example. I was supposed to meet a friend. This could have been a couple of years ago, but there's other examples of this more recently. But this one just sticks in my
Yeah.
head. And she asked me, or we were due to meet at I don't know, 3 p.m. or something like that. And I was just feeling really ropey that day, whatever
Mm.
was going on inside of me. And at around 10 to 3, I cancelled and I said, "Oh, a work call has come up out of the blue." And The bizarre thing is, this friend is completely on board with me just calling up 5 minutes before, just going, I feel like a bit of a mess today. Could we just delay it? Sorry for the short notice, blah,
Yeah.
blah, blah. But I didn't do that. And I just know the feeling in my body, like for the few hours after it, that I just kind of had to say to her, by the way, I said that to you, but that isn't actually what happened. I just
Yeah.
feel really ropey and I don't know why I didn't feel like going into it at the time.
Yeah.
And she didn't care. And but the feeling I had in between that, in those few hours, I knew I was contributing to my own disease. And
Mm.
I'm not saying that it's always so clean and it's
Yeah.
always tended to like that, but I get the sense that we have no idea how much disharmony we create between, just how you put it, like when the
Mm.
story that we're telling ceases to match the inner reality. I think it's colossally important.
Absolutely. And we might notice it in things like tiredness. We might notice it in things like compulsive eating. We
Yeah.
might notice it in compulsive scrolling. We might notice it in kissing lots of boys. We might notice it in cutting, that there's something, yeah, or ruminating, that all of those things are like a cry from the deep, that there's a part of like a deep part of us that um is calling to be heard. And that way of shutting it down is a bit like saying to the kid, shh, so there's something of like, and actually I was kind of, I did a, one of the things that I do is I share these daily like tiny little pops of like how of tools and how we can honor and help the self. So one of the things I would really recommend for that is, even if we don't have a fix for that, when we're noticing that cry from the deep, it can feel really scary, and I get that, particularly if it's connected to a deep pain and messiness that isn't an easy one. But even if that situation, if we were to use, and we know biologically, we're programmed biologically to be soothed by a soothing voice and to be soothed by a soothing touch. So
Mm.
even if, just like we would with our kid when we get stuck, we might say, "Hey, Felicity, like I see that you're really hurting, and I'm so sorry. Like I don't know how, like I'm feeling a bit nervous too, but I just want to send you a bit of love and say, I see you and this is hard, and I'm proud of your courage." So even if we do something like that, that says to that cry from the deep, I'm not shutting you up, I'm not punishing you, I'm not abandoning you, I don't know how to do this yet, and I send you some love from this other part of me. That's something. Mm.
Like I think this is I think that's one of the more underappreciated things. Even just with somebody else, we can be so in a rush to solve something, and even
Mm.
intellectually or verbally kind of solve something, but even just to still be held and
Mm.
soothed by another, like just in a hug that involves no words or any other expression, and just by the very act that we're just absolutely there and present for somebody. I don't know. I think there's something really there's still something kind of rich and probably underappreciated to that.
With all of our flaws and failings and uncertainties and fumbling. And I think sometimes when people come into therapy, they want to they're hoping that you'll be a magic person that will, fix them. And I think I always kind of have that thing. And that can be a very tempting place for me as well.
Yeah.
Learned early on to be like, how do I rescue as a way of pleasing the person I'm with. But actually, so there's something about intentionally stepping out of that place, the place that says I'm omnipotent is a false place, and it pulls you away from the messy reality of the soul. What I always say to clients, just like we can, let's not forget, we can be our own witness, so we can say this directly to ourselves. you know Felicity, I'm not sure how to help Felicity, I don't know how to help you right now, but what I do know is I love you and I would like to be present for you, even if I'm like bumbling right now. So there's something for us of like, and what I say to my clients is, you know, the moment that I start earning my salary and you start earning your therapy bonus points is when you don't want to come in and I'm going, oh my God, I don't know what to do next. That's actually the most fertile therapy territory, because it's when you don't know what to do next, it's when you've excluded your traditional, the client's usual coping strategies, which have got them into this position. Actually, that's when you as a human being meet another human being, or meet yourself and say, okay, well, now all bets are off, my friend. Now we have to really be present. Now we have to really do the work inch by inch. This is where we relearn stuff. Like that's the territory. That's the richness, that allows us to play, because otherwise we're on the hamster wheel, doing the same old shit, going round and round. So it's scary when the hamster wheel stops and we say, this is too painful to go on, or I don't know what to do next, or I don't have all the answers. But that's when your unique, vital connection with the earth, with the world, the unquenchable soul, like that's where we access that part of the self, and that's a different kind of growth. Yeah, I don't know if that makes sense. Yeah.
To me, you're speaking my language here, so this all resonates deeply. What is it about that? Um, you said there just about the human meeting the human. Whether that's in therapy or any other space. Like I think so much of what you've been kind of saying is like a revealing of an expression from, or of of that kind of humanity. What do you think that does to ourselves, even to be in that presence, or to meet each other that way?
Oh, what a lovely question. Well, can I give an example from my own life, which I'm sure um, my beautiful friend Lucy might sometimes be like, why do you always go on about this moment? But it was a really profound moment in my life. And I come to it for a reason. You said, like, what does humanity mean and offer, when we hit that place? So I once hit a moment in my life when it was probably the closest that I've come to actually ending my life. I was really feeling like all of my doors were closed in and I couldn't see a way out. And I felt so bad, so full of kind of shame and pain and lostness. And I was living with my lovely friend Lucy at the time, and she was about to go out. And I had always found it really hard to be able to open up to people when I needed help. That felt intolerably vulnerable, and I couldn't really believe on a very kind of molecular level that anyone could or would be present for me, and that would lead to anything. I really thought I had to clean up my own mess. That was the thing. I see that so often in clients. Well, that I've got to clean up my own mess before anyone else has to deal with it. But on that night, I was lost, and I was like, well, maybe, and Lucy was due to go out, and as she was leaving, she happened to turn around to me and say, "Are you okay?" And I was like, "No." And she looked at me and she went, "Well, I'm not going to go out then." I don't even remember what happened the rest of the night, but there was something in that molecular moment for me that changed me. It was the thought that when I had nothing, there was somebody else in the universe for me. And that gave me, it just shifted me on my axis. And I think if I had had more pretense, if I'd had more defenses, if I'd had more, I would never have allowed myself to be so vulnerable. And I would never have had the opportunity of that molecular reprogramming. Something shifted for me. Yeah.
That's absolutely gorgeous. There's something that came to mind for me. Someone I forget which. There was a group dialogue that I was hosting, and somebody was kind of cursing the fact or bemoaning the fact that I see this pattern and then it happens again. And, it's easy for me to see it in somebody else, but I can't see it in myself sometimes. And somebody else just kind of said, well, maybe that's the point of why we actually need each other. Do you know, like there's something about the sense that maybe we're feeling so isolated because we've come up with an idea that I have to sort out all my own stuff before I bring it to somebody else. And which only kind of exasperates our whatever space that we may presently be in.
Wow. I mean, I really like that. And that's uncomfortable, isn't it? Because people often, our defense behaviors against that intolerable vulnerability are our ugliest behaviors. Let's be honest, are the things that drive the people that love us fucking mad. Or the people who don't love us, the things that make people go, "Ooh, you're a bit difficult," or "You're a bit of an arsehole." Those are
Mm,
all our defense behaviors. So when we allow somebody to, so it's uncomfortable because other people will see patterns that we're engaged upon, which make us feel seen and shame. It's that thing of like you feel like you've been caught with your flies open, or you feel like you've tucked your skirt in your pants or something. That's what it can feel like when somebody sees your patterns. And their ability to see your patterns is your gift, is also, if we can, if we don't open up spaces for people to say those things to us, we don't allow ourselves the opportunity to shift on our axis, because we'll just keep using those same old annoying, off-putting, unpleasant behaviors that we think are the things that defend us from shame, but they push us round in a more problematic cycle, don't they, of defense and, uh, you know, the same patterned problems. Yeah, I don't know if I'm kind of understanding or if it's slightly different. Yeah.
no, for me, I think there's I don't know about you, but I hear this sentiment so often that like, oh, my last relationship was such and such. Now I'm really working on myself, and until I'm fully fixed, I'm not going to engage in another relationship. This kind of thing.
Mm,
And I think that we've put a we've put purity ahead of sincerity. Um,
mm,
and I think when we're sincere, I think it's not that all of these patterns fall away. Um, but there's so much less pressure if you can be sincere with somebody and show them what you truly feel like right now, or who you truly feel you are in a particular moment, versus this idea that I have to work away in private and before I could show what I am in the moment.
wow.
And
Yeah.
I only say this is mainly from my own anecdotal experience, but I remember I met my wife in northern India 9 years ago, and over our first cup of coffee, maybe it was just, I'm from Ireland, she's from Germany. Maybe I'm never going to see this person again. I don't know. Maybe I'm just tired of telling the same story. But we joked, like, had she met me in London where I was living before, and she met me on a Friday night and I had a couple of drinks, I would have been giving her my highlight reel. When she asked me in India why I'm there, I could have said, "Oh, I'm doing Vipassana and I'm learning about yoga and this and that."
Mm,
I just said because I've been a bit of a wreck, like jealous, insecure wreck in relationships. And she goes, "Oh, what do you think?" We got into it more, and I remember, like a bit like your moment there. I remember to this day just being met with someone's complete acceptance. Like we weren't a couple or an item at this point, but I remember how fondly she looked at me after I explained my
mm.
whole spiel, I guess. And I, there's something about, I think, what humans can do for each other, to even show us the way back to some acceptance, or even to realize that there's space to be what you are right now, your whole mess. And, and somebody could actually just be grateful to hear the truth, or to feel like they're hearing the truth. And how that can also even be medicine for them. Like, it's not even just all about them serving you in that moment. Your friend Lucy, who I know as well, I'm sure in that moment, if it's the same Lucy,
It is
I
the
don't know.
same. It is
Yeah,
the
yeah.
same.
But in that moment, she's getting a direct hit of somebody's humanity.
Yeah.
Do you know?
I mean, that's such a, yeah, and I really resonate with that story that you told. That's such a moving story. And funny enough, that's what I was thinking for the position of your wife hearing it, or not then your wife, but I was thinking, um, what a gift actually in many ways to have, because also when someone's so honest with you, it says we're messy, like share your mess is okay too. There's another meta message in that, isn't there, that says there's a home for you, let's make a home for each other, or let's make a home for all of us in this like messy world, and when somebody's too polished or someone's too like cool for school, or it's kind of you it's a bit off person, like I love, there's something of like, I think I find that a bit off-putting in a way, like it's um maybe a bit intimidating, or yeah, I just think I can't see anywhere for my mess to have a home with you. Like my mess with you feels like a weakness if you're perfect. Whereas if you're another messy person, I'm like, oh, beautiful, you know, let's be messy. Yeah.
But but even still, though, I think the sentiment that we may even have around, someone feeling like that they're quite together, like, I think if we're paying attention and if we're being really honest about the thoughts that go through our head at different times, it's not that I have to take them all seriously and identify with them, but wow, just to watch all my thoughts in a day, like, in various different situations, whether they could be judgments, whether it's moments of deep love and reverence for even a
Mm,
stranger, whether it's complete judgment of a stranger or anyone else. Like, there's such a wide, like, there's such a vast experience that we're all dealing with. We're living in a world where, even depending on if you've got a very strong belief around your faith, we don't have a felt experience of what it is, like what occurs on the other side of this life. Presently,
yeah.
we don't have that. Like, there's just, I think if we're really paying attention and if we're really being honest, like, there's just so many moments that just in this human existence where I think any kind of sense of mess, if we even phrased it like that, it just kind of makes sense. Like, there's just so
Mm,
much to process, even when we feel like we've been ourselves. That's the other part of this, right? Like, yes, there can be all this losing ourselves in a process and not knowing who we are.
mm,
But man, even when we know who we are, like,
mhm.
there's, there's
Yeah.
lots of things to deal with in this life that still are just, they're not so black and white. They're not so neat. It doesn't always lead to perfect answers or
And
perfect
also, I was just
situations.
thinking, sorry to cut you there, Mark. I was just thinking there's
Mm.
also something of like, and maybe we're all different on this. I'd be really interested to hear somebody else's thought. But I guess like there's something of like, I'm not so interested in opinions. I feel like opinions are very heady for me, and they feel very dry in that sense. But opinions can often feel like a more comfortable thing to share, like a political opinion or a this or a that. But when you talk from like um what's happening in your heart, or something that hasn't been fixed, there's just something, it's still got some life in it. It's like it's like a flower or plant versus, uh, a plastic plant, and that kind of like, here I stand and how great I am, or here's my opinion, just feels a bit like a plastic flower for me, as opposed to that's something living, breathing, mutating, and like you say, that's watered and changed by, the sun or the opinions of others or somebody else connecting with you. That's such rich loam, isn't it? Um, yeah, and yet, of course, it feels much less vulnerable to share the plastic flowers. um, yeah,
And with that, I guess so. That's almost the trade off, isn't it? And I'm not saying that we can. I'm not saying that we can always have the capacity to bear our hearts, because sometimes it can just feel like we haven't even felt it enough to make sense of it to even
true.
communicate it. And at the same time, if we don't do it enough, I really think that's a perfect kind of metaphor. Like, life starts to feel like this, maybe this perfectly shaped plastic flower. Like, it looks the part, but it doesn't feel the part. It doesn't feel alive. It doesn't feel either life affirming or life giving.
The rich kind of plant of the soul is like eclipsed in there, and that's why there's something about, therapy. People find it like a scary space, but it's also a gorgeous space because it's also the place where you come into contact with the living soul, with the parts that are actually that unquenchable soul, um, that can feel so eradicated, or like, what's the word? Like, oh, what's it when you sort of clean something up, or like sanitized? That's it.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
For you, how did you, like, when did even the idea of, and this is going to be maybe a bit general, but just the sense of soul come into your understanding? Or even when did that word start to be more imbued or filled with meaning, or feeling like a part of this journey for you?
Do you know what, Mark? That's such a great question, because also I feel like that's a part where I'm really like, I don't even really know what I mean by soul, and yet I use the word
Okay.
soul all the damn time. So I'm an atheist, right? I'm not so so and but then at the same time, I guess, like, once again, I'm an atheist, but I'm sort of, I hold my head knowledge a little bit lightly, because I think that I've often found that my head, my thoughts about things, my opinions, personally, maybe not for everyone, maybe it's just my opinions, I can't really trust to that much, but I could get very opinionated and then think, what a wanker. Um, so I think, I kind of like, I kind of hold my head logic a little bit lightly. So that word soul, you know, I guess um there's something about like our connected spirit to the world, the part of us that's connected, and that looks above the parapet of the banality of like the everyday task, and sees the soul in the other, and sees the depth and dignity and the heights. And for me, I love poetry, and poetry is a space that really opens up connection with. Yes, so I guess I kind of feel my way with that, and I guess, over the last kind of 10 years, I've always worked in sort of, often like NHS and local authorities and things like that, where the words like love and soul and honor are like, often people really don't know what to. People are very uncomfortable with those words, but actually, I'm like, so I just kind of go. I'm just going to go with the words that feel like they speak to me about. Yes, I don't even really know what I mean by those things. What about you? Is that a word that you would use? And what would yeah, what's your relationship to it?
Yeah, to be honest, what you were saying there, though, and maybe I'll send it to you. What you just said there, when you listen back to it, I thought that was gorgeous. Like, I think there was, I feel I have a similar relationship with some of these words, like you do. Love would be a very, I've mentioned even on this podcast before, I was stunned when I did 120 private interviews around this question of what is a good life, that had nothing to do with the podcast, just my own project, how
Mm.
infrequently love was mentioned.
Wow.
And just kind of, what a strength, we're in a world where we're looking for all these theories about how we can fix it and the complexity of life and all that. And it seems we've kind of got this elephant in the room called love that nobody wants
Yeah,
to address in our ideas
yeah.
of how maybe we could chart new paths for ourselves. Um, Soul is a word too, which I find myself using a lot, which, I wouldn't have a strict definition for, but I think it's like yourself, it's a word that feels very fitting.
Mm,
Um, it feels very fitting to the depths of a human being, the depths of this experience of life, maybe even a nod to the connectedness of the depths of our individual experiences of life. And so his soul feels very fitting for me
mm,
in much of the conversations that I have with people, whether for this project or just in general.
mm,
Um, but I think it's very it's very astute to bring love into that too, in the sense
mm.
of just how we've moved away from words or meanings or feelings or experiences that don't seem so attached to life, or at least sources or energies in life that feel quite generative as
Yeah.
opposed to transactional or
Mm.
draining, or I have to build that up, or that don't feel infinite, I guess, in some ways.
Yeah. Oh, I think that's so true. And that's such an interesting reflection about, I'm just now really thinking about how infrequently the word love is used. I mean, yeah, that's such an interesting one. I was saying this to someone. Oh, this beautiful person that I was speaking to today. We're talking about, yeah, we can be very wary of the very things that we love science nowadays, don't we? Love putting everything down to science.
Mm.
And I kind of think, science has its place. But I'm like, yeah, what about matters of the soul? Like, what about, I think one of the really profound things that happens in therapy is, I feel a deep love for the people that I serve, and actually not just in therapy, but in all of my sort of roles and work as well as. But that deep love is for me, what it feels like is a deep unfurling connection, a deep connection with that person's unfurling, with the unfurling of their soul, and that is to stand in awe at, yeah, the dignity of the human soul, the dignity of, yeah, that's an extraordinary experience to witness that, I think. Yeah.
There seems to be so many words you kind of touch on, unfurling,
Mm,
dignity, like presence, and then they almost sound like at the like in not in opposition to, but they almost sound like very different from where you were kind of starting, even in your own journey of, almost. And I agree with you too, this sense that we sometimes create this kind of conceptual prison for ourselves, and even just in our presenting the plastic flower that we've touched
yeah.
on, just how little space that leaves for chaos, or spontaneity, or like genuine connection, really, I guess, and even connection with ourselves, but especially then, I guess, our genuine connection with other people too. So
Oh,
I really like how
yeah.
you're describing that meeting, or that witnessing, or and the space that allows somebody to unfurl as such.
Oh, do you know what, Mark? You're just prompting me to think of a beautiful poem called We, and by, I think it's by Kerry Hardy, where she says, "The washing sways on the line. The sparrows pull at the heaps of drying weeds I've left around. Perhaps this is middle age, untidy, unfinished, knowing there'll never be time now to finish, liking the plants, their strong lives, not caring about flowers, sitting in weeds to write things down, look at things, watching the sway of shirts on the line, the cloth filtering light. I know more or less how to live through my life now, but I want to know how to live what's left, with my eyes open and my hands open. I want to stand at the door in the rain, listening, sniffing, gaping, fearful and joyous, like an idiot before God. Isn't that gorgeous? That's What's Left by Kerry Hardy.
You know, it touches on something somebody once said to me recently, that they almost spent the first decade of their children's life almost feeling shame for the messiness of their household, and realizing then that that was the thing to be cherished, you know. And I don't know, there's so much even of what you've kind of touched on, and I think what that poem touches on too, of there's so much of this life we seem to discount, or we're in process to get somewhere, we're in transit to get somewhere, we're at a point where things need to be better,
Mm.
or this is where life is really happening. And it's kind of all it all discounts the so many of the moments that you mentioned even before, just the difficulty sometimes there can be in that sense of vulnerability, but the life that exists almost on the other side of it, the relationships with ourselves and others that are possible once we've gone on the other side of it. And I don't know, there's so much of even the description of things as a mess, or just how it is, whatever way it is. Do you know what I mean? There's something so inviting about so many of the things you're saying, I think, to just feel into that a little bit more, or to express a little bit more from there.
I love what you just said about the life that's possible on the other side of it. And I just
Mm.
think, oh, it's like, look, when we're in that place of perfection, we're looking through a window, aren't we? And there's something about it's so scary to open the door of vulnerability, but the life that is possible on the other side of it is is so rich and vivid, full of scents and the breeze and life and growth. Yeah.
Just as we've gone through this conversation, Felicity, kind of opening up with the sense of, maybe wanting to share more of the messiness, or realize getting to a point where that feels almost where we can find our way back to ourselves. You recall being in therapy and kind of acknowledging, I don't know who I am, and that sad kind of poignancy that I think so many of us go through in life. And maybe that's just apt for the age and everything else, of just trying to perceive or live this life through the perceptions of others that we may not even explicitly know anyhow. And then to the comfort you've noticed, or the calmness that you felt at times when you speak from that place, either sincerity or authenticity, and even if things are messy, how there can still be a calmness within that. Or even this seminal moment you shared with a friend where you just said, look, I'm really not okay right now, and noticing what that brought as well. And so many of the, I don't know, beautiful kind of imagery around creating a self for ourselves, in living life a certain way, and the possibilities that can open up if we give ourselves space and other people space to unfurl, to reveal their souls, to connect from that place. And where life stops becoming this kind of quest or projection of perfection, but more one that is lived in right now, that feels alive and that feels connected. Really curious, Felicity, to hear your response to the question of what is a good life for you.
Well, I feel like you put it perfectly. It's like when we can find in the moment that what it is that's closing the door to vulnerability, like, which is usually what are you maybe feeling like, where's the source of the dis-ease? Where's the source of the shame? And if we can go there and with reverence touch it and share it, and the life that's possible on the other side of that, or with that, we carry that with us as like a very tender part of the self. And I think we've both kind of said, actually, in that place of openness, messiness, vulnerability, standing nakedly before each other and going, this is me, we have such an opportunity to for love and unfurling and witnessing the dignity of the soul, which is not a dignity that comes from being perfect. It's the dignity that comes from all of the like shame and messiness and hopes and silliness, you know, that rich loam. Yeah.
Well, Felicity, I started today feeling somewhat irritable, and after some time with a daughter and a good friend where we could say how things were, um, that trajectory has just carried on through this conversation. I've absolutely adored this time with you. Really, so much of what you're saying resonates, and I thought there was beautiful kind of imagery and poetry in a lot of the things you're pointing to as well. So, thank you so much for joining us today on the What Is a Good Life podcast.
Oh, well, back at you. Thank you so much for the opportunity. What a beautiful space to reflect and ponder.